Hey guys! Today on The Perspective we're going to be talking about Nobel Prize winning author Toni Morrison. Morrison has written many renowned novels, with some of her most famous being Beloved, The Bluest Eye, and Sula.
Let's dive right in and start a discussion on how Morrison delves into raw situations, creating unnecessary discomfort in order to rehumanize blacks, demonstrating that heavy topics cannot be lightly described. Using this as a basis of our discussion here today, would anyone like to start?
I would love to. That's a great point, and I definitely agree. I just finished reading Sula, and I see that theme of rehumanization. In Sula, the main character follows a matriarchal generational trend of doing what is necessary for oneself. As this plays out, there's a lot of deceit that follows in her wake. This betrayal comes when Sula plays bystander as her mother becomes victim to the flames, committed suicide. And even her best friend, Nell, who was connected with her at the hip, begins to hate the woman Sula becomes after Sula sleeps with Nell's husband. Yet, these touchy issues bring light to bigger realizations that devastation is not as transparent as it first appears and is tied to wounds that take empathy to seek out.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. The Bluest Eye is a book that I read, and it has a lot of really heavy topics. Morrison utilizes a little black girl named Piccola to show the contrast between the beauty and the ugliness in life, as well as how it is perceived with race. Piccola is described as horribly ugly and dreams of having blue eyes and fitting into the white beauty standard. Not only is Piccola seen as physically ugly, but she is pregnant with her father's child, which is quite an ugly act in itself. Her father, Charlie Breedlove, was abandoned by his own mother and was never taught how to really love someone. As a black man in the South, he hasn't seen any love from the world and its workings for black people. Charlie is routinely presented with the evil and dominating acts of white men. In Piccola's life, however, when she is granted blue eyes, she is not satisfied enough. She needs the bluest eye, which demonstrates that comparison yields no result and beauty is only a social construct. Arlette?
What a compelling novel, Emma. Well, I had the great opportunity to immerse myself into her 1987 novel, Beloved, where we follow the life of a young, struggling woman that goes by the name of Seth after her escape from a slave plantation. She finds the company of another slave runaway, Paul D., and they quickly build an intimate relationship. The story focuses the most on Seth's dead child, Beloved, and her ghost that seems to come back to life to haunt Seth in her new life. Beloved triggers Seth's past of slavery and murder, which leads to Seth's insanity and a victim of Beloved's strong influence. The book wraps up with Seth's only living daughter aiding her back to health and able to overcome his haunting presence of her late daughter. Seth is then seen as more than just her past and more as an individual. She becomes less of a slave runaway and more of an individual of her own, who built herself up from such heartbreaking trauma. She becomes a human and not just an object.
The award ceremony speech given by Professor Stuart Allen and Morrison's banquet speech bring light to Allen's idea that she regards the African presence in her country as a vital but unarticulated prerequisite for the fulfillment of the American dream. In this way, he promotes the idea that Morrison brings vitality back to a marginalized group of people that have been misrepresented for years.
I caught on to that as well. She definitely embodies African American culture into all her literary works. She makes it clear that works like these are not only necessary in our culture, but yes, vital as well. This idea of an American dream isn't given its justice through the lens of white writers, and thus Morrison steps in and gives the people what they need in regards to African American stories.
Yeah, I definitely agree there.
I find it interesting when Professor Allen describes Morrison's literature in the words, "In great minds, gravity and humor are close neighbors." This is reflected in everything Toni Morrison has written and evidenced in her own summary. "My project rises from delight, not disappointment." With such raw and sensitive approach, I wouldn't personally describe the work of Morrison as a rise from delight, but more of a rise from the ashes that have been left behind by the African American descent. There isn't as much convincement coming from Morrison that her writing ties humor and gravity. What do you think, Emma?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you there. I don't really see much humor in Morrison's work either. She definitely does a good job of exemplifying gravity and weight, though. The discomfort that she elicits in the reader really shouldn't be from utter disappointment, but more so from a mix of both disappointment and delight. In the world, awful things do happen, and it's incredibly disappointing, but the idea of uniting against and around the awful does possess some delight.
That's
I read Alan's speech as well, and his implementation of Morrison's words really moved me. She says, "This is how you can distance yourself from the act and take your life back. You take your integrity back." The act that Morrison guides to distance yourself is the act of othering blacks for the history. Instead, Morrison encourages blacks to take their integrity back and look into the future, finding the human beauty in their future, instead of allowing black history to define their character and potential. As we all know, black treatment in this country has never been where it should be, and Morrison encourages blacks to not let that define them. She integrates them into the act of being human by relating their experiences to things that are completely human, like death, rape, and love.
That's a prominent theme, and I definitely see that in the novel I read. In Sula, emotion comes readily to Sula, especially in her betrayal against Nell. Just as Emma noted from the speech, raw situations are described in bitter detail, portraying proof of the human condition. The graphic harshness of the scene distinguishes the discomfort that can only come from true weight, as presented by Nell as she comes face to face with this deception from both her best friend and her husband. But they have been down on all fours, naked, not touching, except their lips right down there on the floor with the ties pointing down, too. On all fours, like, go on, say it, like dogs. The intensity of the scene, which goes on much farther, makes it almost impossible not to pass judgment on the guilty parties. However, the weight of the situation demands to be felt, which is something that Morrison definitely deserves credit for. With such intensity, it is pertinent to hold empathy at the highest standard. It is later emphasized in the novel that Sula never learned to connect love to lust, thus never understanding the guilt and anger that comes as a result of it. With no distinction, she learned to live in a world of cautionary carelessness, where she did what she wished, while always protecting herself above others. Therefore, going back to Alan's contention of a black presence prerequisite, I too believe that the emotion and hardships black people have gone through are at the very core of such vitality, and that is the basis of why Morrison is such a significant American author.
Well said. The raw passion in Morrison's writing isn't just limited to the brutal scenes of sex and rape, but also moves to the actions of physical abuse. An example from my book is as follows. Anybody wise could take your whole self for anything that came to mind, not just work, kill, or maim you, but dirty you. Dirty you so bad that you couldn't like yourself anymore. And though she and others lived through and go over it, she could never let it happen to her own. Whites might dirty her alright, but not her best thing, her beautiful, magical best thing, the part of her that was clean. This speaks volumes to me because Morrison is told to give African Americans their history back, as described by Professor Allen. And this passage just goes to prove that statement. That sense of black pride in standing up to white oppression is so important to understand because it's even relevant in today's society. Such a sensitive topic to discuss, but brings focus to the humanization of blacks, which is often ignored and forgotten in African American history. Do you think this plays a role in present day?
I definitely agree with that point you made that Morrison's work can be related to today's world, making it even more powerful to read about. In The Bluest Eye, Morrison writes in graphic detail about when Charlie Blueblood rapes his daughter, Nicola. She intensely describes, removing himself from her was so painful to him, he cut it short and snatched his genitals out of the dry harbor of her vagina. She appeared to have fainted. Charlie stood up and could see only her grayish panties, so sad and limp around her ankles. Morrison uses the ugliness of this action to show that all humans have weight and ugliness in their lives. The act really is sad and gray, but it's real, and that's why Morrison brings it into focus. By graphically describing the scene, Morrison shows that this gruesome act really is necessary to hear. Life is hard, and Morrison does not stop short in describing it as so. In The Bluest Eye, she delves right into sex in all perspectives: abandonment, rape, incest, child molestation, and pure lust. But not only does Morrison discuss these themes, she also allows sex to have an abstract beauty. Charlie and his wife sometimes still feel love when they're having sex. Yet Polly, his wife, needs to pretend that she is sleeping. She describes, "He used to come easing into bed sometimes, not too drunk. I make out like I was sleeping. I want him to put his hand between my legs." She later describes, after the two make love, "It be rainbow all inside, and it lasts and lasts and lasts." Polly and Charlie frequently fight, but the two of them can learn to love behind the scenes. demonstrating the rehumanization of blacks. During the period of slavery, black love wasn't brought into the white mind, but Morrison eases that love into the mind in a way so graphic and raw that it cannot be anything but true.
Each novel we've just mentioned all hold a distinctive commonality. They all possess hard to listen to, but hard to ignore themes. Ultimately, the discomfort Morrison provokes through her descriptive, intentionally raw topics act as a necessary catalyst to bring back unrecognized humanity to black culture in American society.
Thank you, Caroline, for that closing, and thank you all for watching, and see you next time on The Perspective discussing Faulkner.